Imagine if the world you lived in, the space you breathed in, and the freedom you played in was suddenly taken away. Imagine if the only person who knew how you felt was a boy who felt it too.
You really like him, huh? Yeah. Gotcha.
In a world where beauty is held captive,
Miss your family?
it takes a special friend
Willie doesn't have a problem with me. Yeah. We appreciate each other.
Looks like Willy's got himself a soulmate.
to set you free.
What's the matter?
Whale's still not performing. We're getting deeper into this.
He was too big and too old to be caught in the first place.
Hey, the whale's worth more dead than alive.
They tried to kill him.
Warner Brothers proudly presents
Let's free Willy. He's got a family out there. I heard him.
the most unexpected friendship of the year.
I gotta look out for Willy, and I gotta do what's best for him. Understand?
If we don't get Willy into water soon, he's gonna die.
Nobody steals a whale.
We gotta hurry. He's not doing so good.
Don't let that whale get away!
Go, Willy, go.
The greatest adventure of the summer. Free Willy.
Kelsi Likes.
Say my name.
Kelsi Likes. It isn't just an anagram, it's my live show where I will discuss everything that I love with you. I'll give you interesting facts and tidbits, ask for your opinions and favorites, and give you mine on a multitude of topics like pop culture, movies, 90s culture, TV shows, books, nerdy topics that I love, and more. And I'll end every show with recommendations of books, articles, videos, documentaries, and other materials that will add insight or give extra information on whatever topic we're discussing. It's about to start, Gut Buckets, so hold on to your butts. May the force be with you. I'll be back, and get ready to engage. Hi guys, it's me, Kelsi, and you're watching my channel, Super Kicking It with Kelsi. So glad that you guys have joined me today. I'm doing some fancy graphics, so hopefully everything goes okay with the stream. Really appreciate you guys' time on a Friday night. Thanks for joining me again. So appreciate it. I really, really do. And now, I'm super excited to talk about this topic because I've always really liked animals, and specifically, I've always really loved the ocean. I think a big reason why I have liked the ocean specifically is because my dad, he always loved things like nature documentaries, shark documentaries specifically, and he was a big Jaws fan too. He still is. So we both have a love of sharks in common. But when I was a kid, although Free Willy's not about a shark, it's about a marine mammal that I just really got attached to, and the story is so compelling and really so heartwarming and touching that it's hard not to get invested in it. Now, some people, they say it's not their cup of tea, and that's perfectly okay, but I do think that this is a kind of iconic movie for the 90s. Even if you really didn't love it, if it wasn't your favorite, because there's many great 90s kids movies that came out in that time period. But I really think Free Willy is super special, and I'll get into this later, but what makes it extra special is that it had real life effects, and I think when we think about movies, a lot of times it's just for our personal enjoyment. Oh yeah, this is nostalgic, this is great. But Free Willy, because that movie was made, it kind of almost started a domino effect and created a better life for the whale that played Willy. And his name was Keiko. And so, yes, Willy was not called Willy, obviously. Just like actors aren't really, when they're playing a character, obviously, they're not using their real name, they're using the character's name. So, same thing with Willy. Willy wasn't his name, it was Keiko, and we'll talk a lot about Keiko and what actually happened to him and how, specifically, the movie bettered his life. Like, we're talking about his life quality was very low before filming. When the film producers got there, and we'll get into this, like, really crazy in depth, his quality of life just improved tenfold after the producers got there and then afterwards as well. During filming and after. So let me just take a look in the chat, make sure you guys aren't saying anything that I don't want to miss anything. Everyone said that they are liking my intro. Thanks so much. I worked really hard on creating the graphics, and I played the Free Willy trailer if you got here early at the beginning of the stream. I thought, why not familiarize everyone with the movie and with old school 90s trailers, VHS level type of quality. But I think that kind of adds to it because that's the type of quality you would have seen if you were watching this movie growing up as a kid in the 90s. So I think I had to throw in there a bad quality trailer just because we had to get that feel for this stream itself. So now that we're all in the mood and we're kind of feeling nostalgic and we want to learn some new facts, let's get right into it. Like I said, Free Willy, the movie itself, I really do think it has a kind message, and I've just always loved the ocean. I wanted to be an oceanographer, actually. So as I said, not only did my dad love the ocean, and he really worked a lot with wildlife for his job in real life, but, he kind of imparted to me just a love of nature. And also, he liked an oceanographer named Jacques Cousteau. If you guys ever watched the movie with Bill Murray, The Life Aquatic, they're all wearing red beanies. And I've talked about this in a previous stream, but the red beanies are a specific homage to the oceanographer Jacques Cousteau. And actually, on one of my magnet boards behind me, is it this one? Yeah, it is. There's a green, sticker thing behind one of my shoulders. That says the Cousteau Society, and that's all about Jacques Cousteau. He really obviously cared about the ocean. He was an oceanographer, did a lot of research, had a lot of documentaries released, did a lot of cool things capturing what was going on in the ocean. Because a lot of people at the time, this was a long time ago, they didn't know what was going on down there. He did a lot of research and made a lot of cool movies that brought light to what was happening in nature. So I really like him too. My dad always liked him. So when I watched Free Willy as a kid, all these emotions and experiences were stirred up. And I was like, yeah, I love the ocean. I love water and stuff. And I'll get into this later as well, but not only do I love the film Free Willy, but I really, really am intrigued by orcas. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the way they hunt, and I will talk about that as time goes in the stream, because they are kind of aggressive, and they almost are a little too playful with their prey. To me, it's like, if you're a predator, get your food. Don't play around with your food. Just like a human, your parents tell you, don't play with your food. Well, some families of orcas, not all, because actually not all orcas have the same diet. There's different families, different pods, almost different cultural groups of orcas, all with their own dialects, which is really why they're so fascinating. They are super intelligent and also highly social animals. So there's a lot of fascinating things to learn about them, but not all pods eat the same thing, and they don't all eat the same way. So not all of them play around with their food in a kind of grotesque, almost horrific way. Only some that I've seen in documentaries do. But besides that, if you put that aside, especially the way orcas are portrayed in some of the documentaries I've watched, and I'm specifically going to recommend some of these documentaries, they're actually portrayed in a really fascinating light, but also a light that I think makes you really feel for the species and makes you really invested in the animal and really care for the animal. So I think that's kind of neat when you take all of that into account. The animals just are really beautiful, And, I love sharks, but orcas are fascinating in a different way. And the funny thing is, even though a lot of people call them killer whales, they are not whales. No, they're not. They are actually part of the dolphin family. They are the largest member of the dolphin family, actually. And an interesting thing, they can weigh up to 6 flippin' tons. Can you believe it? 6 tons. And basically the size of them is almost the equivalent of a school bus, a full-size school bus. That's really huge. So when you're thinking about swimming in the water with these creatures, which in captivity can be dangerous and has been dangerous, because we'll also get into that, there has been orca-related deaths in captivity only, not in the wild. There's no documented cases in the wild of an orca hurting a human. So although their nickname is killer whale, and we'll get into why that's their nickname in a little while, they don't kill humans. They do kill other whales, though. They're not a whale, but they kill bigger animals than them, and they even kill sharks and other creatures too. So I don't mean they just kill them for fun. They eat them. That's part of their prey of some of the families of orcas. So I find all that to be endlessly fascinating, and I think all that leads to kind of why I was fascinated by the movie Free Willy to begin with. So let's get into the actual movie, because I learned a lot of crazy tidbits, and I do want to apologize because I might be looking down at my notes quite a bit because I took massive notes for this stream. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know, like I said before, Free Willy is not everyone's favorite 90s movie. That's okay. And actually, I was just going to lump this movie in with my 90s family movie / kid movie stream that I'm going to do in a few weeks. But I thought to myself, I love Free Willy so much, and there's so many documentaries that can be related back to the movie Free Willy, that I didn't want to just hurry up and rush through the conversation in my 90s stream, my 90s kids movie stream. I wanted to dedicate a whole stream to it because I know for sure I can talk on this subject for like an hour. Whereas if I had to cram and put that in my upcoming stream about 90s movies for kids, then I wouldn't have been able to give it the time I really do feel like it deserves. So although it's not your favorite, I decided to give it its own stream, just because it is one of my favorites, to be honest with you. And before we get into the actual film and all the crazy stuff I learned about it, because man, there's so many connections, it's funny. Almost all of the 90s family movies I've researched has some connection to a different 90s family movie. Free Willy is no exception, and we'll get into the connections with the actors and directors and producers later, how everything just seems to be interconnected. I guess that's no surprise since Hollywood, it's not like extremely crazy large, and I think people who make family movies, that group is even smaller. So when you're talking about the different groups who make films, I feel like the family movie group, the people who work on those type of movies is generally smaller than your average group of filmmakers. But again, the funny thing is, some of these 90s kid movie directors, they directed not just kid movies, they directed other movies that are far different and crazy unrelated to like movies like this. For instance, I'll get into Free Willy, that director, he directed another movie that I don't consider a kid's movie, but it's not like overly adult or anything, but just, I didn't know he directed a different film, and we'll get into that. But before we get into Free Willy, I do want to plug, I've got a ton of great content coming up. I've got a Breaking Bad video I'll be doing with guests, and I've got a 90s Nickelodeon versus 90s and early 2000s Disney stream. What that means is myself and my friend Josh are going to be basically, not arguing, but defending each channel, specifically in the eras I mentioned. So I will be defending 90s Nick, and he will be defending 90s / early Disney, early 2000s Disney. And I told him he couldn't go too late because, like, I can't even defend late Disney. I'm not a big fan of some of the older Disney shows. I do like early 2000 Disney shows. Those are still pretty good, and their original movies are good too, so look out for that. And as I said, I will be doing a whole stream about 90s kids movies. Free Willy's one of them. I'll barely mention it in the stream coming up in a few weeks because I'm going to cover it so extensively here. But the other movies that I'll be talking about quite a lot is Blank Check, and I've got a whole review about how ridiculous Blank Check is. Space Jam I'll be talking about, which I just rewatched last week. Heavyweights, the movie Hook, Mighty Ducks, Mrs. Doubtfire, Home Alone, Sandlot, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. And that's just a few small examples of the movies I'll be touching on, and I'm really excited for that. And in fact, Free Willy is an animal-related 90s movie. There are a ton of other 90s animal-related movies. It's crazy, actually, how many different movies about animals there are, where either the subject matter is about an animal or one of the main stars of the film is an animal. There are a ton. I mean, somebody was mentioning in the comments Flipper, and yeah, that's one of them, but also Andre. There's a whole bunch. And in fact, I've got a postcard or a post-it note I left way over there. I'm going to go run and get it because it has all of my animal notes on it for the other movies. So I'll be right back, 2 seconds. It's my only notes I didn't have ready. I have everything I need here except for these animal notes here. So other 90s movies about animals include Homeward Bound, love that movie, 1993. 101 Dalmatians, the live-action version, which actually isn't too bad. It's kind of corny, though. That's from 1996. Then we have White Fang, 1991. Babe. Who doesn't love Babe? That'll do, pig. 1995. Air Bud, another great heartfelt movie. Very sad at parts. Much like Free Willy, there's some tear-jerking parts. Same thing with Air Bud, I think. And that was from 1997. Beethoven, 1992. Mighty Joe Young, which is more animatronic, but the subject matter is a big-ass monkey. So, same thing. It's not starring an actual huge gorilla, but it's got, metaphorically, a animal subject matter. It's an animatronic. Monkey Trouble in 1994, Fly Away Home. I'll talk a lot about that movie in my stream about 90s kids movies. That is a totally underrated film. Really good. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend it very highly. It's from 1996, and it's about kind of some wild geese that they are orphaned, and a girl has to raise them, and they think she's their mother, and so she has to teach them how to migrate, essentially, or they'll be in danger if they don't. Then we've got Iron Will, 1994, Far From Home, 1995, Dunstan Checks In, which I really don't like very much, 1996, Gordy, 1995, The Amazing Panda Adventure, which I watched a few years ago. It's pretty darn corny, terrible acting, but still kind of entertaining on the whole, for the most part, 1995. As I mentioned, Flipper, which was 1996, and Andre, which was 1994. So as you can see, Free Willy had some stiff competition in the animal movie category. So many different ones made in a short amount of time. I mean, really, you hardly see any of those that I mentioned past 1997. It was like in a 7-year window, all in the early 90s. I find that kind of fascinating. Obviously, producers thought that they could bank on those type of films and thought that those would be successful. And before we go into the actual movie Free Willy and starting to get into the specifics more so, I want to shout out some people in the chat. We've got Nails and NY. Thanks for always supporting me, Nails. I've got Dave Pozeski, of course. And we've got Derek. Thank you for watching and for kind of multitasking. I know you're watching wrestling too. I appreciate you making time for me as well. We've got CJ, Goodspeed Entertainment. Hey CJ, haven't talked to you in a while. How you doing? I really appreciate all you guys, and I just want to warn you, I might not get to your comments as much because I am, dealing with a lot of graphics and also a lot of notes. So I just might not get to all of your stuff. So let's kind of go over what I'm going to touch on today. I've got a whole bunch of different topics I want to make sure I get to, and this is what you guys can look forward to in this stream right here. I'm going to review the movie, which I'm about to do. I'm going to talk about the legend, and this is hard to pronounce, and I might flub it up a couple of times in this stream. The Legend of Natsilane, and that is the story that Randolph tells to Jesse in the movie, and it's basically a Native American story about the creation of orca whales, or blackfish as they call them. And yes, this story is true, but it was kind of altered for the movie, and we'll talk about that because I've got a whole page of notes. It's kind of intensive, but the legend is fascinating. And we're also going to talk more about orca whales and, what they eat, their social structure. I kind of touched on some whale facts at the beginning of the stream, but we'll get more into that because I've got a couple of notes on that, on them as a species. They're very fascinating animals, as I said before. We're also going to talk very extensively about Keiko, the whale who played Willy, what happened to him, if his release into the wild was a success or failure. It was actually quite controversial at the time. People don't know whether to consider it a success or failure, but by the end of this stream, you'll find out what I consider it to be, whether I think it was a failure or a success. And I'm also going to share you guys' thoughts on the movie from Twitter. I had a lot of responses, people talking about why they love the movie and what the movie makes them feel. And then finally, I'm going to recommend other orca-themed documentaries and movies, and that'll be it. That'll be what we're talking about today. So, very excited about all these topics. I think it should be quite entertaining. I hope you guys won't be too bored and think this is too factual, but I kind of like this version of a stream. A lot of my previous streams lately have been just my opinions. This, I want it to be opinion and facts and tidbits and mix it all together to be kind of like the best of both worlds, or the best of all worlds, shall I say. Alright, so let's get into the movie a little bit. And what I think of it. Just so you know, if you guys haven't watched Free Willy in quite a while, you might be wondering where you can watch it. It is streaming. If you have a Netflix subscription, you could find it there for no additional cost, just your membership per month. You can watch it. I'm sure you can rent it on Amazon Prime as well, plus a lot of other streaming services. But if you already have Netflix, which most people do, just go and type in Free Willy and give it a rewatch. I think it's aged well, personally. That's just my feeling. I literally watched it 2 weeks ago with my boyfriend Paul, and he had never seen it before, and I thought he might enjoy it because he likes animals, and we were thinking about the different 90s movies he could watch with me. Well, it would be rewatching for me a ton of 90s movies he hasn't seen that were made for kids, obviously, because he was not a kid in the 90s. Spoiler alert, I was. So we have two different perspectives on the decade and movies, and I like regular 90s movies that are not made for kids, that weren't made for kids, I should say, but I also like a lot of specific family movies that were made for kids, too. Much of those movies he hasn't seen. So when he watched Free Willy, I was so interested to see what he would think of the movie. Would he think it was terrible? Would he think it was corny? And he did say, wow, that really wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was much less corny, and I actually kind of liked it. So I think I kind of got him invested, and then after Free Willy, he rewatched this other documentary about the whale from Free Willy, which I'll talk about later in the stream. He watched that with me as well, and I've already seen that documentary 2 times. This was my 3rd time watching it, and each time I really love the documentary because it just tells you a lot of extra information about what happened to the whale. And I didn't discover this documentary till 5 years ago, and I had no idea that, well, one, I thought it might have been an animatronic whale, but I was like, it looks so lifelike. But no, there was a real whale for Free Willy 1. And then there was also animatronics used in the movie as well. But I didn't know if it was a real whale. When I watched the documentary, I knew it was, and I never knew what happened to him. I thought maybe he would just stay in captivity. But I learned that he didn't. And again, it's all a fascinating story, and we'll touch on it. But first, to the movie. Alright, IMDb gives it a 5.9 out of 10 rating, and this is not a surprise. So you might think that these ratings are a little low. 90s kids and family movies are notoriously rated low for some reason. Critics just destroy them, much like horror movies, and I'm a big horror movie fan. So maybe it's the nostalgia talking, but I think the movie deserves a better score. I thought the child actor was really good. If you compare, his name is Jason James Richter. If you compare his performance to the kid from, let's say, First Kid, which is a movie with Sinbad, that kid actor is terrible. And the character itself is annoying. This character's a little kind of bratty. Jesse is kind of a brat in the movie Free Willy. But the actor really brings a charm to the role, in my opinion. And so I think he's better than other not only child actors in other 90s kids movies, but I think the character itself of Jessie is written better than other 90s kid characters from other 90s family movies. So there's that, and that's just my opinion. If you guys disagree, that's fine. But Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 58% rating, which is a official splat rating. It's not good. Again, this is no surprise to me. This is notorious for kids' movies from the 90s. They are all rated low, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions are great movies. I mean, the ones that are rated high really deserve to be rated high. But I just think that the opposite, the ones that are rated low, not all of them should be rated that way. So take ratings with a grain of salt, because some people don't put stock into them. I don't put a lot of stock into them, but it is interesting just to see what people say about the movies. Alright, and on Metacritic, that's the highest rating out of the 3 websites, they give it a 79. So interesting there. Free Willy was released on July 16th, 1993 by Warner Brother Pictures. So it's kind of aged a bit. And although the critics kind of gave it a low rating and a low score overall, and we're talking, not every single critic. Some critics were more favorable to the movie than others, but the general consensus was kind of low. But 91% of Google users like the movie, says Google. I don't take that with a grain of salt. I kind of take that as truth, because Google will tell you that other users hate other movies. Like, they'll say a low percentage for like a really bad movie. So I kind of believe that most people do like the movie Free Willy, despite what the critics say, just like Google says. Now let's look at a specific review by a specific movie reviewer. And he's one of the most famous movie reviewers of all time, Roger Ebert, of course. And as it says here, from Rotten Tomatoes, he's a top critic. So this review is from long ago. He said, "Whales are not as charismatic as dogs, not as easily trained, and cannot be hugged. Yet Free Willy works its way around the physical reality of its animal lead and somehow becomes one of the summer's best family pictures." So, seems like Ebert approves, which I'm very happy to hear, because, I think more critics should have been a little bit more favorable to the film. And we'll get into the cast in a second, but I always find it a little funny to look up some IMDb, this is great, some synopsis of the film. And different users can make their own synopsis of any film on IMDb. So this is from a user, Ed Sutton, and I find his kind of plot summary of Free Willy rather kind of hilarious, honestly, just the way he worded it. So I wanted to read it. He said, "Free Willy, this is the story. Fishermen separate a young orca whale, Willy, from his parents, and he ends up in a fishbowl at a marina. Meanwhile, a street kid runs afoul of the law and gets caught vandalizing the marina, but his social worker gets him off the hook, so to speak." No pun intended, I guess. He gets him off the hook, provided he cleans up his mess at the marina. While there, he befriends the whale and teaches him tricks, something the trainer hasn't been able to do. But when Willy is a dud in front of the audience, the marina owner plans some bad things, and the boy and his friends must try to, major spoilers, free Willy. I love that, because it's like there's so many sarcastic parts, so many funny words, like he's a dud in front of the audience. I don't know. I just liked that review a lot. And I was like, that's a way better synopsis than I could come up with. So I decided I'm going to just read Ed's summary of the movie. And I think it's quite funny. And here's a more basic summary of the film from a different user on IMDb. Kenneth, he says, "When a boy learns that a beloved killer whale is to be killed by the aquarium owners, the boy risks everything to free the whale." So there's a more basic summary of Free Willy and stuff, and it is what it is. I really like both summaries quite a bit, and I think it kind of encompasses what Free Willy is about, and it's a good summary, both of them. So there you go. If you don't remember Free Willy, maybe that'll jolt your memory a little bit. And now let's get to the people behind the scenes. So the director's name is Simon Windsor, and the cool thing is, he also directed some other movies that I like, and these are kind of underrated films that I think nobody remembers. So, Simon directed this movie called The Phantom with Billy Zane, and It's kind of absurd, but honestly, as a kid, it was one of my favorite movies. And I used to jump around on my pieces of furniture in the living room. I would, like, jump from the couch to this other chair that was a couple of feet away. And I'd be like, oh, I'm the Phantom. I just loved the Phantom. Like, most people pretended to be Batman or Spider-Man or Wonder Woman. I was, like, all obsessed with the Phantom. Randomly, Billy Zane. What the hell? I don't know. Why did I do this? I really can't tell you. But I really think it's an underrated film. It's super corny. But it's a fun afternoon. If you just want to throw it on, give it a try. Give it a whirl, as Kevin McAllister would say. I think you'd be either pleasantly surprised and enjoy it, or you'll be surprised and enjoy it because it's so bad it's good. I don't know, whatever. I like it, and I think it's good. I don't really think it's bad good. I think it's good. But if you think it's bad good, all the more power to you. It's not so bad. All right, and then he also directed the other movie, which I think is more of a made-for-TV movie. I haven't seen this movie in a very long time. It's from the 80s. It's Daryl, and I think you pronounce it Daryl, even though there's supposed to be, it's supposed to be like initials. Because basically, if I remember correctly, this movie is about a boy who's actually a machine, I believe. And I remember I used to love this movie as a kid, although, as I said, I vaguely remember the plot, and I almost remember nothing else. I know that in one part of the movie, he breaks a window while playing baseball. Then in another part of the movie, he's, like, kept in this room. They're trying to, like, poke and prod at him, and I think he escapes. I can't remember, but I'll have to rewatch that for sure. I want to appreciate everyone. If anyone's joining right now, we're talking Free Willy. We're talking all these interesting tidbits. I'm so happy you guys are joining with me for this discussion. I think it's a lot of fun to revisit childhood memories and stuff that we liked as a kid. So those are some of the other movies that the director did, and let's take a look at some of the other actors in the film. Oh wait, before we get there, I don't want to forget. So yes, the director did some other movies, but the executive producer did a lot bigger movies, in my opinion, than the director of Free Willy. The executive producer was Richard Donner. If his name sounds familiar, that's because I just mentioned him a stream or two ago. In the comments, my good friend, good guy Dave, who's in the chat with me right now, he mentioned to me that Richard Donner was the director of The Goonies. So yes, Richard Donner directed The Goonies, and he also executive produced Free Willy. Kind of a cool connection there, and what makes it even cooler is that there's this really cool observation someone made on IMDb. So this is what they said. At the end of the film, after Willy has jumped over the wall, Jesse is talking out loud, saying goodbye to the whale Willy. The scene is very reminiscent of the end of The Goonies, when Mikey is talking to himself and saying goodbye to One-Eyed Willy. See the parallel there as well, One-Eyed Willy and Willy the Whale. Both even sound alike in tone of voice. Both films are set in the Pacific Northwest, and both were filmed in Oregon. Well, some of Free Willy wasn't filmed in Oregon. It was filmed in Mexico City, which is where the whale Keiko actually lived. That tank and that area where he's held that you see in the film Free Willy was his actual home. That's where he actually lived. That small-ass pool, that's where he spent every day for years. That's really sad when you think about it, because in the movie, half of the dialogue is about how it's such an unsuitable place for Willy. It's such a bad, terrible place for him to be kept because it was so small and just, it's not equipped for him. So all that is true, and yet that was his real-life living situation, which sucks. But we'll talk more about that later. But isn't that a cool connection? Who would have thought there was some crazy connection between The Goonies and Free Willy? I think that's kind of crazy. And I don't know. I personally find it quite fascinating. So, and you guys in the chat, make sure you tell me what you think about the movie Free Willy. If you have any thoughts or little tidbits or observations that you discovered while watching the movie, please leave them in the comments and I'll try to read them. I am trying to pay attention to the comments on my phone, so I'm not ignoring you guys. I'm paying attention here and there, just not as much as I usually do. Alright, so we said that the executive producer was the director of The Goonies. Then another producer of Free Willy was Richard Donner's wife. So not only did Richard Donner produced the movie. His wife did too, and she's done other films as well. She was a producer on X-Men movies, Constantine, Logan, Deadpool 1 and 2, as well as, randomly, Pretty in Pink. Those movies seem like they have nothing to do with one another, some of them, and obviously she also produced Free Willy. So I think that's kind of a cool mix of projects that she worked on, and I think it's cool that she got her husband involved in producing Free Willy as well, so it's kind of like it was a mini family affair with that part of making the movie. So in terms of the cast, the film stars Jason James Richter as Jesse, and yes, he became a millionaire because of this movie and the 2 sequels made afterwards. All of the 3 Free Willy movies were made in the 90s. There is a 4th, which I've never seen. It's not with Jesse as the main character. I think it's with a girl, and I think it's from the 2000s. And I've not seen that one. I have no desire to see that one. I'll talk about the sequels with Jesse, which I consider to be the original sequels, in a little while, and I'll tell you what I think of those. The film also stars Lori Petti as Ray, the whale trainer. She also starred in Point Break and A League of Their Own, which I love that. That's the baseball movie with Tom Hanks and with all the other women who start their own team and league. Then there's I want to pronounce this right, so I'm going to say it slow. August Schellenberg, who played Randolph, which, spoiler, Randolph is my favorite character of Free Willy. I just think he's so chill and epic and knowledgeable and just seems like a really cool, fascinating guy. I love Randolph. That character is very, very endearing, in my opinion. I love the way the actor portrayed the character as well. I think that had a lot to do with it. He had a certain charm about him, in my opinion. And also, although he didn't star in a lot of movies that I recognize, I do remember, and I saw this on his IMDb page, he was a guest star on one episode of the 90s show So Weird. And of course, this is a Disney show from the 90s, So Weird. It's kind of like a kid's version of the X-Files, and I don't remember the specifics of the episode that the actor who played Randolph starred in, but once I saw that on the IMDb page, I did vaguely remember his face, being on an episode of So Weird. I think that's kind of a cool connection there, because I loved that show growing up. Then we've got Jane I'm pronouncing all these names wrong. Get ready for flubs of names, because there's so many names written on here. All right, Jane Atkinson as Annie. She's kind of like the foster mom to Jesse. They're kind of housing Jesse. They're not official foster parents yet in this movie, but very nice. Plays a good mom. In fact, not only did she kind of play a foster mom/mom type in this movie, Free Willy, but she also played a mom in Blank Check the following year in 1994. So again, Free Willy is 1993, Blank Check 1994. She played a mom-type character in both movies. But I gotta say, her character is much more likable in Free Willy than it is in Blank Check. And I'll talk about that in my 90s stream in like 2 or 3 weeks. You guys will find out how bad the parents are in Blank Check. They're terrible. They're horrible parents. We'll get into why later. It's hilarious. I can't wait to review that movie. But yes, she starred in Blank Check as well. She's also done a lot of television work. I'm not a big fan of House of Cards. I haven't really kind of gotten into that movie, but she starred in multiple episodes of that, and she had a long stint on Criminal Minds. I haven't really seen Criminal Minds either, so I don't recall her in either of those, but pretty cool that she's worked in film or TV for a very long time. She's had a really good career, it seems like, from her IMDb page. And last, but certainly not least, I think kind of the most sophisticated actor of the group of actors in Free Willy would have to be Michael Madsen. And of course, he's known for his role in Reservoir Dogs, as well as Kill Bill, The Hateful Eight, so obviously he's worked a lot with Quentin Tarantino. This is a very odd pairing, so all of his Quentin Tarantino stuff, and randomly he's in Free Willy. But I think it works because he plays kind of like a tough guy in Free Willy. It's like, he's not like a straight-laced dad type. He talks about how he had a crazy youth, how he never liked following rules. He was better at breaking them than following them. He tells Jesse that at one point. So I think although he's known for playing more scary characters and threatening characters and out there characters, I think it kind of works because they made him a tough guy in Free Willy. A nice tough guy, I should add. He's done a lot of great films, and really, I love that actor. Alright, so those are the actors in the film, and let's get into the film itself. And so I'm going to tell you guys my observations while I was taking notes during the movie. I don't have a lot of observations because I know the movie so well. Most of my observations will be about the documentary covering Keiko the whale. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the awesome old VHS open. They have this whale promo that plays all about how you should save the whales and adopt a whale and end whaling. And this is at the very beginning of the VHS, and I went back and I looked this up before I rewatched the movie. And I remember the song that played in the promo. I remembered this commercial like it was yesterday. It was so familiar to me, and it really brought back a lot of like 90s feel to my viewing experience. After I was watching that, I watched the actual movie, and these are my notes on the movie. So Paul, and this was Paul's first time watching it, like I said, he was appalled at how he thought the whale was treated at the opening of the movie. Now, as we know in the open, he's being like corralled into some nets. They're making a lot of noise. They're hooting and hollering, getting him, roped in, and basically capturing Willy. But this wasn't done with Willy. For anything in the open ocean, they used animatronics. They had two main animatronics, and I'll talk about those later. But once Paul watched the documentary about the whale with me, he found out that it wasn't really Willy being harassed. And at the end of Free Willy, there's a disclaimer that says, the whale was not harmed at all during the making of the film. There was somebody from the Humane Society present during all scenes filmed with the whale. So I think that's a little bit comforting, and once Paul found that out, he felt a lot better about the movie. When he thought it was a real whale, he was like, oh my god, this is horrible, how could they film this? What the hell? So, at the beginning of the movie, there's this cake that the orphan kids, including Jesse, steal, and they go to a skate park and they're like eating this cake. I know this is a weird observation, but I remember how great the cake looked. The cake looked so delicious. It was like the best looking, I guess it was like a celebration cake. I didn't see what it said, but I just remember as a kid thinking it was awesome looking, and it always made me want dessert afterwards. And I was like, damn it. Even as a kid, because I really liked to watch this movie in my senior year of college, randomly, I was in a dorm room. I was having fun in my dorm, but like whenever I wanted to feel nostalgic, whenever I wanted to remember a more simple time, a time like my childhood, let's say, I would always put on Free Willy right before bed. So I'd kind of play it, and I wouldn't always pay close attention to it, but I must have played it like 30 times my senior year. Just, on my computer. I think it was on Netflix then too. And I really enjoyed rewatching it. It was very comforting and, again, very heartwarming. A fun movie to rewatch over and over again. And to me, in my opinion, it never gets old. But yeah, in college, it would make me hungry at the end of the night. I'd see this cake at the beginning of the movie, and I was like, what the hell? I'm starving now, and I want dessert. Thanks a lot, Free Willy. There's a great 90s insult or general insult. They say bonehead. Who uses that insult anymore? That's why it kind of reminds me more of the 90s than today. So there's an orphan girl who's eating the cake with Jesse and hanging out with Jesse's gang, and she looks so familiar to me. And I was like, this has got to be somebody that I know who is in a different movie. And the little girl, sure enough, is somebody I recognize. Her name is Danielle Harris, and she starred in Halloween 4 and 5 as the little girl, who basically Michael Myers goes after this poor little girl. She also starred in the Rob Zombie remakes of Halloween 1 and 2, and, of course, as an adult then, because it was many years after Halloween 4 and 5. And she also starred in Hatchet 2 and 3. So, funnily enough, she's done a lot of horror movies. So, I found that to be quite interesting because I didn't really remember any of that. She also had a lot of guest appearances on the TV show Roseanne. And I do vaguely remember that after I saw it on IMDb, although I can't tell you which character she played. But yes, if you guys go back and watch Free Willy, pay close attention to that orphan girl. She's somebody, in my opinion, who's prominent in other movies. You guys might not know Halloween 4 and 5, but I do. I don't know. I watch those movies quite a bit, actually. It's some of my favorite Halloween sequels, to be honest. Nails and NY says, who steals a cake, though? Head for the candy, fill your pockets. Cake can be dropped. That's a good point, because actually, So they're eating the cake at a skate park, like I said, and they start to see cop lights and cop car sirens they hear in the distance. So they begin to run away, and one of them just steps in the cake, and there's like a very distinct footprint in the cake. And always made me think, man, what a waste of a cake. And it's like the best looking cake too, as I said. So that's a good point, Nails, because they ended up ruining the cake. They didn't drop it, but they stepped on it. But again, the cake was done, they ran away. They weren't even in the park anymore, so they couldn't eat the rest of it anyway. Also, I said, I observed, come on, how did the cops find them so quickly when Jesse and his friend escape into the marine park? It seemed like the cops find them pretty quickly, although they were completely out of sight after they ran away. But my theory is maybe Randolph called the cops when he heard, like, kids in the vicinity, because Randolph had a little house basically very near the marine park, on the same premises, basically. Alright, so, also, I did observe that their graffiti is weak. It's nothing specific, it's just like a whole bunch of wiggly lines. Like, what are they writing? Nothing. It's not till later in the movie when Jesse's cleaning up the graffiti, I only see one word, and it's piss. So you can faintly see him scrubbing away the word piss later in the movie, but other than that, everything they draw on the walls, and by the way, they make quick work of the marina, because every inch of that inside area is covered with graffiti. It's like, were they really long enough to do that? I don't know. I don't buy it. Anyway, this is all stupid nitpicky stuff that I thought was just funny observations, but yeah, we don't see the word pistol later. And Paul did observe, like, wow, when Jesse's cleaning the windows, the graffiti comes right off. He's like, would it really come off that easy? Because it really did come off pretty easy. But then I told him, no, just wait. In a few minutes, he'll try to get it off of the wall, and it won't come off. And sure enough, a few scenes later, he's, like, scrubbing the wall, and nothing will come off. So yeah, Paul, the window being wiped off so easily, a little unbelievable, but they kind of, I think it would be easier to get it off the window than it would have been the wall. I don't know, stupid observations. I think it's fun. Glenn, kind of harsh right there, when he goes to sign the papers from the social worker when they're taking Jesse into their home, the dad-type figure, Glenn, he says, you know, they're talking about paperwork and how the paperwork for fostering a kid is like, you know, as much paperwork as when you're filling out buying a car. And Glenn says, well, this is a lease. I ain't buying yet. I was like, whoa, that's harsh, man. But I guess it makes sense. Glenn's a tough guy character, and it just, I guess it sounded okay coming from him, but that was pretty hardcore from him. But it makes sense with his character because he is the skeptical one about this foster kid and even fostering a kid in general. It feels like him and Annie want to do this, but I think Glenn is more hesitant to bring a kid into the family. I'm sure he's had, like, you know, issues following rules like he talks about to Jesse. So to him, it's weird to kind of be like a dad figure. So I guess that makes sense. So there's a lot of beautiful shots in the movie. I don't have any specific observations, just tons of great shots of the water, tons of even beautiful shots of Willy jumping around in the tank. I really just like a lot of artsy shots in the film. I think it was well done. And this is how little notes I took during the movie. This is all the way near the end of the movie. I laughed because they're all fighting in the water as they're lowering Willy into the water to set him free, and Annie, the character of Annie, is like tackling this big dude. There's no way she'd be able to tackle him, but at the same time she's barely moving. They're barely fighting, so it kind of looked like they were standing still. I think that fight scene in the water should have been a little more epic, but whatever. And now I'm gonna go. Oh, well, I'm gonna fast forward and then rewind. So fast forwarding to the very end, the only part of the movie that I really hate and I've got to tear apart is the CG whale jumping over the wall. It's so bad. If you guys watched the trailer at the very beginning of the stream before I came on, it looked terrible. It's the only part of the movie that doesn't look good. The animatronics look great, but yeah, the CGI, not so much. It was definitely 1993 and, you know, not very good at making CGI look believable at that time. And this movie, I think, had a decent budget, so, I don't know, it's surprising. My dog is grumbling, so please excuse that. I don't know what you're grumbling at. Probably somebody outside. He's going to the door. So, yes, the CGI whale, it's terrible. But I love the celebration that Jesse does after Willy jumps the wall. And yes, it's super unbelievable. That wall is way too high. Even Paul said, why didn't they just make the wall a little lower? That would have been more believable. It was so epically high. But at the same time, Randolph and Jesse did the prayer silently, the Native American prayer that Randolph told Jesse about. And I think it was kind of more a spiritual representation of, Willy being set free. So I think, yeah, it's unbelievable, but at the same time, it had kind of like a mythological element to it, a magical element to it as well. So I think they kind of played it that way, that the prayer helped Willy jump over the wall, but it's still unbelievable. But yeah, Jesse's celebration reminded me a lot of the Never-Ending Story, where at the end of the movie, the kid's riding on Falcor, and he's going, yeah! Yeah! Same thing with Jesse jumping up and down, pumping his fists in the air. So I love all that stuff. Great movie. Those are my personal observations. And here comes Jackson. Don't unplug anything, Jackson. I'll pet you. So, I got my own dog whale here trying to get some attention. Are you being like Willy? You want to perform tricks during the stream? You want to be a star like Willy? Okay. He's wagging his tail now. He must want to be a star. So some other observations from the movie. Like I said, the convincing animatronics. There were two. One was a complete whale coated with, and this is amazing, 2,900 pounds of rubber. And then there was another animatronic that was just like the top half of Willy with a big underwater propeller, actually multiple propellers underneath, to imitate swift swimming. These were used for limited movement close-ups like Willy in the trailer when they're moving him out of the water to the ocean. You got a lot of shots of Willy out of water, and so the animatronic was used for those, and they were also used for Willy swimming in open water, as I said earlier. So now let's talk about, and this is rewinding back to the middle of the movie, let's talk about the Legend of Natsilane, and also the prayer that they discuss, Salana, Ayun, Iasis. So Randolph talks about this prayer and how Natsilane said this prayer while he was lost at sea, and it kind of created the Orca. I looked up the prayer, Salana Ayun Iasis, and I couldn't find the exact meaning anywhere. I tried different spellings, and all I could find was somebody said it means to be free. Now, I'm taking that with a grain of salt because I couldn't find an exact translation. However, what I'm more sure about is the Legend of Natsilane. So the prayer itself, I'm not exactly sure what it means, but the legend I'll go into depth on now, and it's fascinating. So, let me just take a sip of water because this is a lot of info right here that I'm about to dive into. Like Willy, I need water. Even though this is like Gatorade, whatever. It's got water in it, doesn't it? Let's just say it does. I'm pretty sure it does. So, now there are multiple Native American legends that deal with the warrior Natsilane. And the story that Randolph tells to Jesse kind of encompasses multiple, the same elements that multiple legends say exist. Randolph says he's from the Haida tribe, but there's another tribe called the Tlingit tribe, and I could be pronouncing it wrong, but this is how that other tribe is spelled, Tlingit. So there's that legend of Natsilane, and then there's the Haida legend of Natsilane, and Randolph says he's from the Haida tribe. So Haida is spelled Haida, and I looked up the pronunciation, so I think I'm doing that correctly. So both tribes tell a similar story. There's a few variants, but similar with both. And I'll tell you what Wikipedia kind of says. And I've looked this up on multiple sites, not just Wikipedia, because as you know, Wikipedia can have wrong info, so I kind of cross-referenced this with other websites as best as I could. So, Natsilane is the human hero of the Blackfish, or Orca, creation myth. One of the Tlingit and Haida stories about how the various supernatural animal species were created. These stories tend to follow an almost dreamlike description of humans and other animals living completely harmoniously. The animals are depicted usually as demigods in these stories. And then Wikipedia says Blackfish is arguably the most important creature in Haida culture. Blackfish is also highly revered in Tlingit culture because of their apparent affinity with humans. The orca or blackfish represents an extremely powerful force of nature, deadly and terrifying to every creature except man, whom he is said to look after. The story describes why this is so. There are so many variations to the tale, though. Some are considerably more brutal than others, and the exact details vary widely according to the storyteller, but the main theme is always the same. And you'll understand what he means by brutal in a second. Literally, Natsilane orders this orca carving that comes to life. He orders them to murder people. And in different stories, he orders them to murder different people. So like in one tribe legend, he goes after his in-laws because his in-laws are jealous of Natsilane and leave him out to sea to drown. And that's how he gets in the predicament where he's lost at sea anyway to begin with. So to get revenge, he gets this orca that has come to life to go and drown his in-laws. In another version, it's his actual brothers that he gets the orca carving to drown. But at the end of the story, essentially, Natsilane orders the orca never to harm another human again and to actually look after humans. So I'll kind of explain what Wikipedia says about this and the meaning of this. But first, let me just kind of talk about what the orca symbol means to the Haida culture. Because I kind of just talked a little bit about the Tlingit culture, but in Haida culture, the native orca symbol, or killer whale, symbolizes family, romance, longevity, harmony, travel, community, and protection. Stories tell of Haida ancestors putting on skins of killer whales to enter the realm of the spirit world, where killer whale people and humans visit, communicate, and feast together. So the Haida culture has a Natsilane legend, but they also have a very different view of orcas in the sense that they think that they're part of a spirit world. Like if you put on a skin of an orca, you can like communicate with that spirit world. Which I think other animals inhabit as well. It's all very in-depth and fascinating, honestly. I wish I knew more. I wish I owned the book that Randolph presents to Jesse in the movie where he tells him this story. So, like I said, in the story that Randolph tells Jesse, though, he omits some of the parts of the legend and he makes it more PG. He kind of talks about sea otters helping Natsilane, and that is in the real story. There are some sea otters involved in the actual legends that I've researched. And Natsilane does carve an orca or blackfish out of wood, both in the actual legends and in the story that Randolph tells. But like I said, what he leaves out is the murdering of the in-laws, or the ordering of the drowning of the in-laws or his brothers in some other versions of the story. But like I said, though, if you look closely at the book while Randolph is turning the pages, you could actually see the word in-laws. So I think obviously the book is a real book, which has the complete legend, violence and all. But, you know, obviously in the movie they can't write all that stuff. It's just way too in-depth to describe why Natsilane would order his in-laws murdered. It's just easier to say, like, it's a mythical bond and all this and that. Because basically the moral of the story Randolph is telling Jesse is that he has a connection with Willy, just as Natsilane had a connection with his orca carving, which basically created orcas in this legend of the Haida people. So again, after Natsilane drowns the people in the different stories, he then orders the blackfish to never harm another human, as I said, and when he finds a human in trouble at sea, the fish must help him. And like I said, you can see parts of the real story in the book. You could see pictures of otters in the book that Randolph has in the movie. And Wikipedia says, the story has obvious themes of self-preservation, a reliance on the earth, and karma, but it must be interpreted in a Tlingit mindset. Although Randolph was from the Haida people, this mindset of the Tlingit tribe says life and animals are equal to humans. A similar mindset for the Haida people too, though. Blackfish therefore represents the force of nature that can be achieved when nature and humankind are joined. While the carving is created by Natsilane, it is assumed that the sea otter in the story brings it to life. The rather brutal ending should not be misinterpreted either. This is a happy ending, where good and the natural world, Natsilane and the Blackfish, have prevailed over man alone, the brothers, the people who were drowned. In the wild, orcas do not attack people. It's not clear if it's due to societal norms or because humans are not part of their regular diet. So basically, although in this story you've got an orca going out and killing humans, in the wild that doesn't happen. It has happened in Captivity, as I said in the beginning of the stream. We'll talk more about that. And this is interesting. So I didn't know this, but Wikipedia says, and I'm taking it with a grain of salt because I haven't seen gargoyles in years, but they say that there's a minor human character in the Disney TV show Gargoyles that is named Natsilane. I find that very fascinating, and I think I really love the whole myth of Natsilane. I love it a lot. Alright, so now let's go to the viewers and what you guys thought on Twitter about the movie. And I really love the way people just express how they feel about the movie, because it obviously means a lot to so many different people. Alright, and first we're going to start off with my friend Brittany at KirbyPinky23. I remember seeing Free Willy at the movies when I was 4. We went on a field trip during day camp. I still remember the scene where Willy was flying overhead, over the hill of course she means, and I was thinking that Willy must be a special species of whale since he could fly. LOL, she says. I still like this movie today. I really love how she thought it was like a special species. It's funny how kids think differently than adults. I love the kid mind. Alright, now we got our friend Good Guy Dave at Dave Pizeski. I think Free Willy is single-handedly responsible for how I grew up believing in conservation and protecting wildlife. That's how much of an impact it had on my life. Such an awesome movie. I'm glad Paul liked it, because I was saying in the tweets how Paul never saw it and he didn't hate it. And I was very happy that he didn't hate it, by the way. I was so afraid he would, tear it apart. He liked Free Willy more than Space Jam, spoiler alert. Alright, so now we've got Derek at Derek Stark. I liked the movie, and the ending made me sad. So I think the ending is sad, but it's also bittersweet because obviously Willy is free, although Jesse can't hang out with him anymore. It is a happy ending. He finally gets to be in his natural habitat, swim in the open ocean, and it's a feel-good story in my opinion. So then we've got my friend John at Big Paws on a Pup. They freed Willy the first time. Why a trilogy? But still good though. So yeah, they did free Willy, but the other movies have to do more with Willy being in the wild. In fact, they encounter Willy in the wild. One has to do with an oil spill and saving the whales in the affected area, and Jesse's in that movie. Glenn and Annie, those characters are in that movie, and the character of Randolph is in that movie. And then Free Willy 3, I think, has to do with trying to stop a whaler. And so I think those premises are kind of unique. And they did not use a real whale for Free Willy 2 or 3. They used animatronics for the full movies, completely. Then my friend Kristen said, I'm actually pretty frightened by killer whales, but for you, Kelsi, I'll retweet your Free Willy tweet. And I understand the reason I included this tweet is because a lot of people feel this way about killer whales. They are afraid of them, they're scared of them. And yes, killer whales are on the top of the food chain. As I said, they've been known to eat sharks, other whales that are actually bigger than them, stingrays, seals, but they also eat fish too. Some species just eat salmon actually, and they don't really eat seals and stuff. So although they've got a pretty bad reputation, because they do kind of play with their food, as I said earlier, I do think they're beautiful creatures and deserve to be free, regardless of if you like them or not. I think one thing we can all agree on is that they shouldn't be in captivity, at least in my opinion. They are supposed to swim hundreds and hundreds of miles a day, every day. They're supposed to feel the waves. They're supposed to feel the natural tide. So all of that is taken away from them when they're put in captivity. Not to mention, they are separated from their families, which, To some animals, that wouldn't be a big deal. Dogs, if you think about a dog and use that as a comparison, people adopt puppies, and obviously they take puppies away from their mom and dad and their brothers and sisters. It's not a big deal. The dog is happy, or at least seems happy, and really bonds with his new human family, or maybe even other dogs if there's a multiple dog family from different dog parents. The thing about whales and specifically killer whales or orcas, is that they are extremely social creatures in that some whale families stay together for their whole lives. So a whale is born, especially a male whale, sometimes he'll stay with his mother his whole life. Some cases he'll go off and find another pod, but most of the time whale pods stay together for their entire lives. And, for a while SeaWorld would tell you that the lifespan of a whale is longer in captivity than it is in the wild. That's a lie that SeaWorld would spread. It's not true. In captivity, the whales live only at most 20 years, both male and females. Females in captivity live a little bit longer, males live a lot less long for some reason. And there's other negative effects about captivity besides just a shorter lifespan. But in the wild, males can live up to 50 or 60 years, and females can live up to 90 years in some cases. So we're talking about you'd separate a whale from decades of time with his family. And not only that, sometimes when a whale is taken away from his family and put into captivity with other whales, it's like you'd be putting me in a house with somebody from France who only speaks French, because like I said earlier, whale pods, killer whales are unique in that they have their own language. Not only do all whales have their own language, like dolphins kind of have a more universal language, whereas killer whales have their own dialects, meaning different groups of whales speak different dialects. So Willy, or Keiko, the actual whale who played Willy, when he was housed with other whales in the beginning of his life, after he was captured, he didn't get along with those whales. They were from a different group. They didn't like him. They bullied him, in fact, and we'll talk about that later. It's crazy, but yeah, you can't just put whales with other whales and say, oh, he's got company. No, it's like you're putting me with somebody from France and I don't speak French. Yeah, we might get along a little bit, but we might hate each other too, or have nothing to talk about, or whatever. It doesn't, because we're both humans, it doesn't mean that we're gonna get along. Same thing with whales. They're no different, especially, like I said, killer whales. So yeah, yes, they're scary, but I think they should be free. And we'll get into more of that, much more of that later. Then I've got another tweet from Good Guy Dave, and I think this is a great observation. He said, he thinks Free Willy is a heartbreakingly sad film. I must have watched this movie dozens of times, and it never gets old for me. I loved everything about it, from the story to its message about conservationism. It's a story of a boy and the bond he formed with a whale and overcoming impossible obstacles. I cry every time I watch it, he says. Dave, I cry too, especially during the scene with Glenn, where after Jesse steals Glenn's truck, and then Glenn comes and finds him, and Jesse is just begging and pleading with Glenn, like, please help me, help us save Willy, I'll do anything you want, anything. And then Glenn's like, I don't know what you think I want from you, Jesse. And Jesse's like, I don't know. I just gotta take care of Willy. He needs me. I've got to be there for him. And that part gets me every time. And I did cry when we watched it with Paula, and I was trying to hide it, but apparently he knew I was crying. Whatever. HBK367 is in the chat right now. Thanks for joining. And he says, as a kid, killer whales were my favorite mammals. Yeah, they're great animals, very beautiful creatures for sure. And thanks so much to everyone in the chat. Again, I'm not getting to read as many of your comments as I want, but I'll be sure to look at them every now and then. All right, so Dave has some great points with his tweet there. It's such a powerful film, and I can't say that enough. And this is an exact opposite take on it. I've got my friend Prime Nostalgia Podcast at KVNG Primetime. He says, the only thing I know about this movie is Michael Jackson's song. That's all I got. So yes, Michael Jackson had a song in the movie, and it's a great song. And I actually am going to play for you a part of the song right now. I've got the promo about the soundtrack from the VHS that I ripped from YouTube. And here we go. I'm going to play it for you right now.
The movie is Free Willy. The music is incredible. Now, the original motion picture soundtrack, Free Willy, featuring music by Michael Jackson, NKOTB, 3T, Funky Ports, and smash hit music from SWV, the Free Willy soundtrack. Available now on MJJ Epic Soundtracks.
As you can see, the soundtrack was pretty awesome, but I want to go beyond the Michael Jackson theme and actually say that I think the score is really epic and awesome. I love the score of the movie Free Willy, and I actually got some notes about the score that I'm going to read for a second, if I can find it. Somewhere. Where did I put these? Essentially, I guess I don't have it. But anyway, my basic thoughts about the score is that I really like just the epic feel of it, and there's just some really sad parts when Willy whines, and it's the saddest part of the movie for me when he does that little, like, I can't even do it, but it's a sad, terrible whine. And then Jesse's harmonica kind of tune that he plays throughout the movie when he's sad, that always plays when Willy whines. So, I don't know, I just think it really perfectly fits with the emotional feel of the movie, and the Michael Jackson song is great too, though, and I just remember that promo that I just played for you guys on the VHS. It's like, just like the Save the Whale promo I watched before I rewatched the movie, I remember this same soundtrack promo just as much as I do Save the Whale promo. It's really, just makes you feel like you're back in the 90s watching an old school VHS, which I love VHSs. That graininess kind of gives you an extra layer of appreciation, I think. I think sometimes things are a little too HD these days, a little too crisp. And I think that's kind of the same idea when you look at a CGI film. Sometimes it's just not as good as a film that used practical effects. Like, if you look at Jaws, so much better than any movie about sharks done with CGI. There was a movie, I forgot what it was called, the one that was made about the alligators this year. I thought that was pretty decent, but still, some of the CGI on that was also ridiculous too. So, I just think sometimes old school is better. Newer is not always the better route. Let's back to our Twitter comments now. Let's go back to that. Andrew at PhantomLord87 is quoting The Simpsons, who did spoof Free Willy, and he quoted it by saying, "Oh, he didn't make it, and he crushed our boy. Oh, what a mess." Basically talking about how Willy didn't make it over the wall, crushed Jesse. Funny little spoof. I haven't actually seen that clip besides the GIF he put for me in that tweet he sent me. But I'll have to go and look that up on YouTube. Now, here's another funny comment from the Crossover Podcast at MPierce6. He says, "I think Michael Madsen, who plays Glenn in Free Willy, I think him playing a loving, caring foster dad is ... odd." And of course, he means in reference to him always being in other tough guy movies and really extreme movies. And then he goes on to say, "For sure, Glenn was good." I mean, not Glenn, that's not his real name. Of course, Michael was good as Glenn, but it was just hard to divorce him in that role from, hey, that's the guy who slices off that dude's ear in Reservoir Dogs. Point taken, Crossover Pod, point taken. And we go to my friend Jody at Jody ADLE. She said, "That movie made me cry." And I feel you there, Jody, just like Dave said, just like you said. And I've said it too. It makes me cry almost every time I watch it. And then finally, and we'll talk a lot about this coming up, we've got at G Wait, so you're trying to tell me they actually freed Willy? LOL. He meant it as a sarcastic comment, but yes, they freed Willy. And funnily enough, I was surprised by this when I found the documentary about 2 or 3 years ago. So not everyone knows that it was a real whale, and that whale had a crazy life story. And a lot of stuff happened to him and unfolded. Alright, so now let's go to a kind of controversial comment here. At the bitch_witch. I love the movies. I used to own the replica necklace from Free Willy 2. However, I understand how unethical they were filming-wise as an adult. And I kind of disagree with this. At the same time, I also agree. So technically, if you're talking about the word unethical, you think about cheating on a test or making money in a shady way. If you're thinking in those terms, yeah, I do think the filmmakers and the studio and everyone involved profited from a whale in captivity. And who knows if it wasn't for public pressure if they actually would have done anything about him. But at the same time, I think we could throw the ethical question out the window, because if the movie hadn't been made, Keiko the whale's life would have been so far worse than it was. It would have been not as rich as it turned out to be because of the movie. So we'll get into all of that. And in fact, I've got a lot to read about this right now. So it's a whole thing about ethics and why I think it was okay to film the movie Free Willy. So just bear with me, because I want to read what I wrote, because I kind of concisely and very, I want to make sure I say it correctly, because I don't want to make anyone mad. So if you guys disagree and think it was a totally unethical film, that's okay. But this is my thoughts on the matter. Keiko the whale, who played Willy, wasn't harmed or harassed during filming. The film also uses animatronics for some scenes, as I said. Essentially, if it wasn't for the film, Keiko would have been in captivity for his entire life since he was 2 years old. But because of the film and its success, and the many people who came to care for Keiko through the movie and through the making of the movie, the actual producers, he was able to feel what it was like to swim in the open ocean again. And so, at the bitch_witch also had more comments and said, even though his life was bettered by the filming of the movie and they improved his life, the question of ethics still exists, despite the bounds that they took to better his life, even after it was done filming. I understand what she means in terms of maybe it was unethical because they made money off of him. But at the same time, as I said, if he had never been in the film, whether it was ethical or not, he would have been stuck in that insanely small pen. The pen in the film was his actual pen, as I said. It was made for dolphins. He's like close to 6-ton whale in his early, late teens at the time, I believe. Literally, dolphins are much smaller than killer whales. So I am glad they made Free Willy, because not only did it help free Keiko and made him a star and people care about him to end up freeing him, essentially, but it also raised awareness, and the whole message of the movie was captivity is wrong. So regardless of if things didn't change elsewhere, and I'll get into that, I think it's a great thing that this film was made. Yes, there was money and there was profit, but at the end of the day, it was for the best in terms of it helped Keiko's life. And that's worth a lot, in my opinion. So then my friend Dave, at Dave Pozeski, asked, was there any real-world... Sorry, I'm going to start over here. Dave says, was there any real-world changes made because of this film? You said it raised awareness, and we know of the controversy at SeaWorld and all of that, but how much did Free Willy contribute to the conversation over the treatment of whales or sea life? Well, and this is what I wrote because I was thinking about how to answer this, so I wrote my thoughts out. I said, well, it did have an impact. It saved a whale from living a terrible life in a small-ass pen. Even if that was the only thing that was yielded from the movie, that's good enough for me. But, in addition to that, they ended up outlawing whaling in Iceland, where Keiko, the whale who played Willy, is from. That's where he was captured from. So, when they released Willy back into the wild, many years after the movie, you can directly trace the outlawing of whaling back to the making of Free Willy, because if Free Willy wasn't made, then Keiko's health wouldn't have improved. He wouldn't have there wouldn't have been this public outcry to free him. And then once he was freed and came back to Iceland, it was a huge deal for that community. They were proud to have him return. There was tons of press positively covering whales being in Iceland, and thus they outlawed whaling. That is very special and important, in my opinion. And that, who knows when that could have happened. So in terms of ethics, I think the making of Free Willy was a good thing. Yeah, people made money. Yeah, it was made for selfish or entertainment reasons for the most part. But you can argue that all day long. But if I have to choose between this movie being made versus not being made, which would leave Keiko, like I said, in that tank, living a subpar life, then I'll take this movie being made all day, every day. Without the movie, there wouldn't have been an outcry for him to be freed. The choice is easy, in my opinion. Like, super easy, guys. Whales swim hundreds of miles a day, as I indicated earlier. Keiko was doing circle laps in a shallow pool over and over and over again all day, day after day. No tide, no waves, nothing natural there for him. Sometimes there was a bottlenose dolphin in there for him. But otherwise, there was no other whales. It was just him and the trainers and the humans he interacted with, which eventually became like his pod, and I'll talk about that later too. So, also, his health improved while filming the movie because the crew and producer, they saw how terribly he was being taken care of, and they invested in improving his living conditions. So in Mexico City, the scene where they show the marina, that was where he was being kept, as I said, and it was very small. And not only was it small, but there was other problems with the tank. So I think the film itself not only improved his life, but it made people look at whales in captivity differently. They made them think maybe whales, being captured aren't a good thing. That's the whole message of the movie. So then, when Keiko was able to return to Iceland, like I said, that had huge real-life implications for multiple whales, for all wildlife. It was a big deal. That change could have taken years. We don't know when that could have taken place. We just don't know. And if people want to talk more about ethical issues and commercialism, I really do think Shamu is the poster child for that. And obviously Shamu is closely associated with SeaWorld. Now, I do believe there would be a bigger ethical problem with the filming of the movie if they had moved Keiko to a small tank to tell a more dramatic story. However, that was his actual tank. They didn't move him for dramatic effect. That was his conditions. And then moving backwards to SeaWorld, that's a whole different animal. No pun intended, of course. In terms of freeing whales at SeaWorld, if the documentary Blackfish can't accomplish that, nothing will. We'll talk about Blackfish. The Free Willy movie was not responsible for the lack of improvements at SeaWorld. Two separate cases. Keiko didn't belong to SeaWorld. But I think the whole idea that SeaWorld didn't want the movie to be made at their facility says a lot. And when I talk about the movie about Free Willy, the documentary, they talk about how, the filmmakers approach SeaWorld, they approach other places. They wanted nothing to do with the movie. They didn't want to use their facilities for the movie or their whales because they knew the message of the movie was to free the whale. Their money comes from having whales in captivity. So it just went against everything SeaWorld believed and how they make their money, essentially. But having said that, obviously the message of the movie was dangerous to them, but it's really, really surprising to find out that SeaWorld actually helped improve Keiko's living conditions during the filming of the movie. They sent over better quality fish for Keiko to eat while he was staying there in Mexico City. Keiko's vet was also the vet for a lot of whales at SeaWorld, so that's the common thread there. And so the veterinarian had to acquire this fish from SeaWorld nearby, and that's the fish that was given to Keiko. And so I said before, SeaWorld did not own Keiko, so they had no financial reason to help improve his life, especially in the middle of filming a movie with a message that was the exact opposite of their philosophy and their message. And there is a great article that told me these facts about SeaWorld providing the fish, and it's all about Keiko and SeaWorld and the documentary Blackfish, and this article is on National Geographic, and it's literally in my description of this YouTube video right now. You could find it below, along with a whole bunch of other whale links that you'll be able to find there as well. So to reiterate, if the movie Blackfish can't force or pressure SeaWorld to free their whales, nothing will. But what it did do is affect park attendance and their public image. Blackfish literally exposes SeaWorld, and it contains interviews with former trainers all speaking out against SeaWorld. However, I still contend that SeaWorld is a much different story than the making of Free Willy. For example, SeaWorld would tell their trainers, like real-life trainers, they would tell them, orcas in captivity live longer than in the wild. We're helping them by having them here. This is just one example of the lies that they would tell and what they would say to people working for them. Literally misinformation to the max. But in Free Willy, the character of the whale trainer named Ray says that whales don't get flopped over fins in the wild. It only happens in captivity. She says that maybe they really do need more room to swim, and she doesn't pretend that Willy will have a longer or a better life in captivity. The VHS promo, as I said, leading into the film, is all about saving the whales and adopting a whale to help end whale hunting. So, if people are concerned about the filming conditions and how Keiko was treated, Keiko was captured at 2 years old. He was in his late teens during filming. He wasn't captured for the movie, and he wasn't moved, as I said, to a smaller pool for dramatic effect. He wasn't forced to interact with or perform with trainers for the first time just because of the movie. He was already performing for his entire life in captivity. There was even someone there, as I said, from the Humane Society overseeing his scenes, which I think is a good thing. And as I said, the producers and filmmakers took steps to cool his tank. So the tank was actually kept at a way hotter temperature than a whale from Iceland was supposed to be kept in. So they ordered coolers, actually also from SeaWorld. They provided those coolers for the tank. And Keiko's stomach and health issues were largely caused by poor conditions in the tank. And so they treated his skin disorder, and they gave him medicine for his stomach as well. The pool was filled with city tap water. Tap water. Whales live in the ocean, seawater, with salt. So yes, they added saline, like salt, to the pool, artificial salt. Not like ocean water. It wasn't ocean water. It was just tap water. This is not good for Willy. And during the movie, when he's like waving his flipper, underneath his flipper, you could see this, I don't know how to call it, like speckled looking skin, scabs it looks like almost. That is not how a whale is supposed to look. A healthy whale doesn't have that. And later in life, Keiko looked different than he did during the filming of Willy. That was all a skin disorder caused by the hot tank, caused by the terrible water conditions in the pool. But again, the producers and filmmakers improved all of that while they were there. And also, if you want to talk more about the filming conditions, Keiko the whale was actually pretty lethargic leading up to filming before the filmmakers got there. The pool was too hot for him. He had to conserve his energy and keep cool, so he didn't move around a lot. Plus, it was really small. He couldn't even breach out the water. In the wild, whales can completely, they're so big, it's hard to imagine that this is possible, but they're so powerful, and because the ocean's so deep, they can swim so far below, and they can breach the water essentially, and their whole body gets out of the water. Willy could never do that in the tank. He could barely, get his top half out of the water. It was so small, and also he was so lethargic and out of shape because of just the conditions. And so once they got it cooler, he had more energy, and also he was engaged because they were really working with him every day. Unlike some days where the park was like no attendance, the filming, they were working with him, they were spending time with them. He loved kids. The actual whale Keiko actually had an affinity for children and would really be engaged with the actor who played Jesse. So he had at least the documentary says he has a really fun time filming the movie. And he seemed to be invested and interested, and his mind seemed to be stimulated. And again, they're very smart creatures. They have a high intelligence, much like dolphins do as well. And they are of the dolphin family. So again, I think it's great. It kept him active. It gave him more energy. It improved his life. So I think the unethical people are the whale catchers who caught and sold Keiko to the first place. They're the ones who are bad in the first place. And also the parks that purchased him. If whales weren't in captivity, we wouldn't even have the film Free Willy. And yes, I love the movie, but I'd be okay with it not being made if it meant that whales were free, of course. Because, Free Willy, the concept wouldn't be there, but whales in captivity exist, so of course someone thought, let me make a movie about freeing a whale in captivity. So, although it'd be better for this whole story not to exist, I'd rather a movie like Free Willy exist than one that glorifies captivity or glorifies SeaWorld or anything of that nature. We're going to get more into Blackfish in a second because I am going to play the trailer for you guys, but I just don't think there might be a small ethical issue of Free Willy, but I think the good far outweighs the bad. So if you guys disagree, that's okay. I hope you're not hating on me too much in the comments. There's a lot of details to this, but it's an intricate, an intricate issue, but I think his life was better for the making of the movie Free Willy. I really do. I wholeheartedly believe that. If his life wouldn't have been improved, and if they would have just left him squandering in the tank after the movie, then it would have been like, yeah, this movie is a fraud. He's not free. He continued to live a terrible life in captivity, but that's not the case. So, I got my friend John in the chat saying, and this is blasphemy. He said Chili the Penguin is greater than Willy the Whale. No way, John, no way. And I like this comment by Nails and NY. She says, the movie was intended for entertainment, but it made the world care by giving just orcas a face/name for people to really invest in and want to help. I do think that's true. And she also says the documentary Blackfish is heart-wrenching, but it's important for people to watch, and I do agree with that too. And Dave also says the message of the movie increased awareness about whaling and what was happening to whales like Keiko. I do agree. Alright, so there is a lot more we're going to talk about Blackfish too, because there's so much to do with that film as well. But first, before I get to Blackfish, I do want to talk about orcas a little bit. Alright. Actually, no. I got this specific order I want to do things because Blackfish is such a big conversation that does have to do with Keiko as well. Because we'll find out about that connection. There is a connection between the whale from the movie Blackfish who has killed trainers and Keiko the whale. There's a lot of similarities between the two of them, and we'll get to that. And I know this stream is going long, but I'm so passionate about this topic, and I think it's really fascinating who knew all this information was behind Free Willy. All of this comes from Free Willy and orca whales in general, so it's so fascinating to think about so many facets that you can learn about just coming from the movie Free Willy. So let's go to our final tweet that I'm going to read real quick. And it's, this is a misconception that I don't necessarily agree with. I guess, I wouldn't say it's a misconception, because I guess some people could argue that this is true. So at KOMCHEE, they say, I loved the movie Free Willy, but I'm sad that Keiko, the whale that played Willy, died because he was released into the ocean and couldn't adapt to his surroundings. The way that is worded is what I basically contest the way it's worded. They say, because he was released, he died. His life, as I just said, was way better, not only because of the film, but after he was released, which we haven't gotten into yet, his life was so much improved. So, I don't know if he would have died at the same exact age in captivity, but my opinion is that he would have actually died sooner in captivity than in the wild. And that is because, I mean, look at his health conditions before filming Free Willy. I don't think that they would have really improved much, even if he was moved to another performing facility. He might not have gotten along with the other whales. He could have been bullied. He could have been harmed by the other whales. And we can get into that later, because yes, there is such a thing as whale-on-whale bullying. And it's terrible. It's very sad that it happens. But again, this is what you create, and what happens when you take one whale from a different world or a different culture and you mix it with another whale from another culture. They're from different worlds, essentially. They're not from the same culture. They don't speak the same metaphorical language. And literal language, too. So there's so much to digest about the Keiko story. So what I want to kind of promote right now, and I'm fast forwarding a tiny bit, I want to talk about the actual movie, the story of Keiko, the Untold story of Keiko. It's such a good movie, and I think everyone should watch it. There's a link to the website about the movie, and there's also a link to the trailer about the documentary as well. And again, it follows Keiko after the filming of Free Willy is over, and into his journey into the wild as well. And so here is what I took notes on when I watched Keiko the Untold story. So, after the movie was made, producers were still worried about Keiko, but they also faced public pressure. Tons of kids wrote in, basically pleading and giving their lunch money and making drawings saying, okay, free Keiko, free Willy. Both things were drawn and sent in. And so all that pressure was created. And so Warner Brothers, the producers, and a lot of other people outside parties worked to end up freeing Willy, but it was a slow process. You can't just release a whale that's been in captivity his whole life into the wild and leave and be like, okay, we freed you, that's it, it's done. You've got to do this in steps because Willy was captured at an unusually young age. Most whales are captured 3 or 4. He was captured at 2. He was hardly weaned from his mother. He still didn't learn how to eat fish in the wild. He didn't learn a lot of the things he would have learned had he stayed with his mother for many years to come. So he didn't really know how to fend for himself. He didn't learn the normal things that most orcas do in the wild. I mean, heck, he had to learn how to breach out of the water when they let him go, which is what most wild whales do. So, essentially, they first moved him to Oregon, and they created this huge, very deep ocean pen. And what that means is there was a net and an area where he couldn't swim out into ocean. That's for his safety. He's not used to fending for himself. But he was basically in the ocean in Oregon. It was cool. He could dive fully, and his skin disorder was completely gone. The water was cold like he was used to. He could actually start to breach out of the water. He looked like a different whale. They showed footage of him. He was so slim. And yes, he wasn't with other whales, but they kept him occupied by having a trainer. There was like an observation trainer room where they'd be behind glass and they would, play him movies of other whales. They would also play the movie Free Willy. And the cool thing is, in the documentary, they say that they talk about how he probably recognized himself in the movie because orcas are actually self-aware animals. And that's very rare. Like, a dog sees himself in the mirror and he doesn't really recognize that it's him. He doesn't have a sense of self. He maybe thinks it's another dog, or doesn't even know what to think of it. Maybe he doesn't even can't recognize what he's seen. An orca looks in a mirror or a reflection and knows that what he's seeing is him. Research has proven this. And so, so when they would play Free Willy sometimes, and like Willy would kind of react to it, actually, or Keiko, I should say, would react to the movie as if he knew it. So he was very stimulated there, and yes, he did have trainers. They weren't just teaching him mindless tricks. They also put live fish in his pen to kind of awaken his hunting and foraging instincts, essentially. So all of this was in preparation for the next step. The next step was to move him to Iceland, to free him, to have him in the open ocean, and to where he came from, and maybe, hopefully, the whole dream goal, which to me is a really hard goal to have. I think what ended up happening was as good as you could have gotten, but the ultimate goal was to hopefully reunite him with his actual family. Like, maybe if he ran into his mother, there'd be recognition, and he could rejoin a wild pod of orcas. Spoiler, that didn't happen, but he did enjoy living in the wild. A lot of people, like the person who sent in the tweet, argue that it wasn't successful. His release, he didn't thrive. He did die of pneumonia in 2003 at the age of 27. But he had lived successfully in the ocean in Iceland, and then he journeyed with wild orca. He swam away with a pod and made the journey from Iceland to Norway, which is a 900-mile journey, and his trainers were nowhere nearby. And there's evidence, I should say, not concrete proof, but there's evidence, and we can infer that he fed himself, he was hunting for himself during that journey, because to swim that distance and not eat, he would have lost weight. However, when the trainers, they did follow him to Norway, they flew there and met him, because he turned up in like a public place, but there is evidence that he did not lose weight. They measured him afterwards. So that tells me that he was eating for himself. He was eating live fish. Right there's a success part of the story as it was. He never learned to do that. He was in captivity his whole life. And yes, he was attached to his trainers, But they didn't deprive him because they still were there. They had a house nearby, his open ocean pen. And there's a two-pronged process here. In Oregon, it was a more closed facility, but still huge. Still way bigger than Mexico City. And the cool thing is, I think UPS or somebody helped sponsor the expensive plane ride to transport him. Imagine a multi-ton whale having to be transported by plane in a tank of water. How'd they do that? It's crazy. And then again, he got transported to Iceland, and that's a long journey, I would think. And the U.S. Air Force actually donated an airplane to help transport him to Iceland. And companies like the Warner Brothers Studios and, like I said, UPS all helped fund this move. Which really, let's just talk about the pricing as it is. People talk about, them selling Keiko memorabilia. They needed to pay for that. That facility in Oregon was multi-millions of dollars of money to build it. It's incredible how much it cost to build that. Not only to build it, but then to transport him again to Iceland. And they built him, it wasn't the same because it was way more in the open ocean, but there was a little tiny, not gate, but like net fence that was kind of like, he could go, I don't know if they kept it raised in Iceland, but once he journeyed from Iceland to Norway, they created a new home for him in Norway, and that's when he never was contained again. He was free to come and go at all times, and he would come and go. He would literally swim off and be gone for days, and then come back to the pen, see his human people that he had really strong bonds with, and then he would go out again. So to me, all that points to it being a success. And I just think people who say he died because he was released into the wild, he would most likely have died in captivity as well, because male orcas just don't live very long, regardless of how well they're taken care of. You look at animals at SeaWorld, which are kept in the right temperature water, and they are fed the right fish, but they still don't live very long, and they're still, I think, emotionally traumatized, and we'll talk about that more as this goes. I am getting towards the end here, but the main point is he had a better life. Imagine being able to go all the way tons of feet down and then come fully out of the water, which he did eventually learn to do. So yeah, I think it was a good thing. I really do. And he got to experience what it was like. He did not really completely interact with wild orca, but he was on the peripheral of groups of orca, and he would swim away and kind of mingle with pods, although, he never fully integrated and left completely. But I think that was expected. Like I said, humans were his pod in a way. That's who he grew up with, from 2 to 20, to 27. Humans. You can't really completely take that away, or you're almost scarring him in a way, I would think. And I think he would, and he kind of, when humans were gone for a long period of time and he couldn't access his trainers, he would kind of seek out random people. And I think that's why people look at this release as a bad thing. But I look at it as a good thing, and I wish there wasn't so many naysayers and that they would do this with more whales. But they just won't. Nobody can force SeaWorld to release the whales. That's the thing. I don't know. It's a sad thing. It really is, because I think Keiko was happier, and you could see that in how he looked, his personality, his energy, and we don't know how he passed away. They're saying it was a pneumonia, but I also, people are also criticizing that when he popped up looking for people after making the long trek to Norway, that he got noticed and he got recognized, essentially, because he was a famous whale, that kids jumped in the water with him and started to swim with him, and there's people who contest that he got a infection because of that. I still think he had a healthier life, regardless of what happened, and like I said, whales don't live very long, no matter what, in captivity, and at least he got the freedom. He wasn't fenced in, there's something to be said about that. That's very special. Would you like being in a small cage all day, every day, locked in your house, you can't leave? Can you even imagine being in one house all your life, never leaving your house? No! And these whales have a bigger world than us. They have the whole ocean to travel. We can't even travel that far. When we walk out the door going to work, we're not traveling the distance that an orca travels every day in the wild. It's just crazy. Okay. I know that's a lot of stuff to digest there, and I'm getting kind of like preachy, but I don't know. I think all this is so fascinating, and it's important. I really do think it's important. Alright, so I think now I want to go and switch gears into the Blackfish discussion, and then we'll be wrapping up after that. Let me just make sure I went through all the tweets, and it looks like I did. Cool. Alright, so here we go. Here is the Blackfish trailer.
When you look into their eyes, you know somebody is home.
They're an animal that possesses great spiritual power, not to be meddled with.
Orange County Sheriff's Office.
We need SO to respond for a dead person at SeaWorld. A whale has eaten one of the trainers.
Tilikum, though, is the one that went after her.
Dawn is the senior trainer here at Shamu Stadium.
She captured what it means to be a SeaWorld trainer, that it made me realize what happened to her really could have happened to anyone.
I've been expecting somebody to be killed by Tilikum.
We weren't told much about it, other than it was trainer error.
It didn't just happen. It's not a singular event. You have to go back to understand this.
The speedboat herded them in, and they could just pick out the young ones.
This is the worst thing that I've ever done.
When Tilikum arrived at SeaWorld,
He was twice as large as the next animal.
We stored these whales in what we call a module, which was 20 feet across and 30 feet deep, and the lights were all turned out.
Probably led to what I think is a psychosis.
All whales in captivity are all psychologically traumatized. It's not just Tilikum.
If you were in a bathtub for 25 years, don't you think you'd get a little psychotic?
Dawn would tell you that it was her mistake.
They blamed her.
It's just a bold-faced lie.
I was just instructed to get rid of the tape.
the industry has a vested interest in spinning these. That sells a lot of Shamu dolls. It sells a lot of tickets at the gate.
There's no record of an orca doing any harm in the wild.
Alright guys, so that was basically the end of the trailer there, and to bring it full circle, Blackfish is a really powerful documentary, as you might have just seen in the trailer. I would highly recommend it to anybody who wants to check it out. I think it's really fascinating, it's eye-opening, but I do want to say, okay, so every film has a story to tell. Even documentaries, like when you watch reality TV, it's not really real. Most documentaries, there should be almost all truth to the documentary, but some documentaries do tilt and lean a certain way. You could argue Blackfish might do the same. It has a very anti-SeaWorld message. And one of the articles I've linked to in this description of this stream talks about the, vaguely, I mean, the guy who is writing the article knows the vet who is Keiko's vet and also the vet at SeaWorld, and he talks about how SeaWorld actually did do a lot of good and does do a lot of good for sea life and sea animals, but, you know, they handled the Blackfish, well, I wouldn't call it, they did handle the Blackfish documentary Fallout terrible. They also handled the death of the trainer terrible. As you could see in that trailer, they were saying it was trainer error because she had a ponytail. That's just not the case. Orcas don't just kill people in the wild. It doesn't happen. It wasn't her ponytail, as the trailer kind of indicates. Tilikum, the whale who has killed 3 people at SeaWorld, had an emotionally scarred life, you know, and I'm going to talk, there's actually, like I said, a lot of similarities between Keiko and Tilikum. They're not so different, but they led very different lives. Their lives kind of started like this, with parallels, and just went completely different, perpendicular, totally different from each other. But, you know, SeaWorld did do some good here and there, says the article, but they didn't handle anything correctly, you know, and also they do kind of go out for money with the performing in the whales and all that. So it's just the PR stuff was not handled well. They should have never said it was trainer error. They should have outlawed whale performances a long time ago, and they should never have captured whales. Most of the whales in captivity are owned by SeaWorld, so you can't really overlook all of that. So yes, the documentary might have a slight tilt to an agenda on one side versus the other. However, there are some valid points behind that. I think one of the most powerful things about the movie is that most of the people interviewed are former SeaWorld trainers. They all came out against SeaWorld. And they loved the whales they worked with, but they just started to see, after working there, so many lies piling up, things didn't add up, cover-ups of whales harming the trainers, just things that didn't make sense, and also, the whales not getting taken care of to the extent that they should have. They shouldn't have been forced to perform, and so on and so forth. There's lots to this issue. I'm going to read a little bit about Blackfish. Jackson, my dog's going crazy, moving stuff. So, I want to quote a little bit of that article I'm referencing in my description that I have that does talk about Tilikum, the whale, which is the star of the movie Blackfish, also Keiko, which is Free Willy, and SeaWorld in general, and Blackfish the movie as well. So, author Kenneth Brower wrote, "Good twin, evil twin. Blackfish and his themes set me to thinking again about Orcanus orca, which is the Latin term for killer whale. The killer whale, the sea's supreme predator, and our strange ambivalent view of this animal and the narratives that we impose on it. Here's one. Tilikum had a sort of a twin, Keiko, the whale who played Willy, in the movies. Both were captured as 2-year-old calves off of Iceland, Keiko in 1979 and Tilikum in 1983. Both were motherless males abused by other whales in Canadian marine parks. Both were moved to facilities further south. Both, on maturing, suffered the collapse of the dorsal fin, which is the floppy trademark of all captive bull orcas. So essentially they mean male orcas. Almost all students of Orca believe that they are deranged in captivity, some more than others. Tilikum's record puts him at one end of a continuum. There have been dozens of attacks on trainers by an assortment of orcas in the marine parks around the world. Blackfish shows video from several of these episodes at SeaWorld. Obviously, and this is me saying this, obviously Keiko is at this other end of the continuum. People know both he and Tilikum, and you could even say that they're both famous, but each for very, very different reasons. And again, you can watch Blackfish to find out the story of Tilikum, because they specifically go in depth on him. And it's just sad state what happened to Tilikum, because although he killed people, this is an animal that should have been free and shouldn't have had the life that he had to endure. It's really sad, the type of life he had. So here's some facts about Tilikum. He was nicknamed Tilly, and actually most of the trainers really liked him, but they did observe kind of deranged behavior and psychotic behavior every now and then from Tilikum. As their trainer, they observed this multiple times through the years. Multiple trainers, and they're all in Blackfish talking about these observations and their experiences working with Tilikum. Like I said, he was a captive orca. He spent most of his life performing at SeaWorld in Orlando. He sired 21 calves, of which 10 are still alive. I don't know how up-to-date this Wikipedia page is, but 21 calves. And let's talk a little bit about the similarities between Tilikum and Keiko. Same upbringing, same bullying, same bad circumstances. I think Tilikum had it really bad, though. I mean, he was kept in a box overnight at one of the parks he was at before he moved to Orlando. He was kept in it was essentially a metal case. He had to be away from the female orcas, which would literally tear his back up with rake marks. Not just a little, because in the wild, rake marks happen from women's teeth, the female teeth on the male orcas. It's kind of like a mating thing. But these female orcas were bullying him. You know, he had rakes all over his body. he was being bullied. So he had to be kept separate from them in a tank where he couldn't even turn around. Very, very shallow as well. In the dark, complete darkness, no stimulation. Orcas don't even fully sleep. They only sleep with half of their brain turned off because they are conscious breathers, which means they have to tell themselves to breathe. They have to be semi-conscious at all times to breathe. Unlike us, we breathe automatically. It's just a thing that happens. Not for them. They have to regulate their own breathing. And orcas, it's fascinating. They're so social that when one orca is having problems breathing, the other orcas in the pod will gather and lift the orca up and keep him at the surface. The same thing when an orca passes away, the orcas, like almost paying tribute to him, will keep him at the surface for hours and hours and hours, including up into the time he takes his last breath and afterwards, and then eventually they release him to the bottom of the ocean. But yeah, they're very social creatures and very intelligent creatures, so to keep him in a box where he's nothing going on, it's just terrible. It's inhumane, really. And here you go, he was captured at 2, as I said before. This is all the information you see on your screen is a lot of what I talked about in same kind of circumstances as Keiko and all of that. And here we go, this is interesting from Wikipedia. Orca attacks to humans in the wild are rare, and no fatal attacks have been recorded. However, 3 of the 4 human attacks in captivity, Tilikum is responsible for. He's killed 3 people. That's crazy. Even after the first death, how he was allowed to keep performing, not allowed, because it's not like they're taking away a privilege. He shouldn't be forced to perform regardless. But how they kept the performances going and had people in the tank with him over and over again, I'll never know. Never. It's just crazy that they did that. It's nuts to me that they just kept it going over and over again. And again, so basically the film Blackfish that I'm recommending to you guys, it claims that orcas in captivity suffer psychological damage and become unnaturally aggressive. And again, Tilikum was an example of that. I think he's the poster child for that, and that's why he was the main focus of Blackfish. But again, I think there's some valid evidence that we cannot ignore. Even if the film has a slight agenda, you can't ignore the evidence that they present. So again, Keiko could have wound up like Tilikum, but he was given a better life, a better opportunity to be free. And I think maybe some orcas, just like people, have a propensity. Some of them may be, if the circumstances are right, maybe some would be more aggressive than others. So although Keiko and Tilikum are similar, maybe Keiko didn't have that predisposition to be as aggressive as like Tilikum did. And again, it's like nature and nurture. There's a little bit of both that affects humans, and I would think it's the same for whales. Because yes, they've got a lot of learned behaviors. They've got a lot of behaviors that are instinctual as well, but also they've got a lot of things that happen because of their surroundings too. So it's a little bit of all of it. And a lot of stuff I think they're just predisposed to being like because of their chemical makeup, because of their who they are, their genes and stuff. I'm sure it's not called genes, whatever you want to call it, their makeup. But yeah, it's all very fascinating. Keiko and Tilikum, completely different, but very similar at the same time. Alright, so there's more recommendations for more great whale documentaries. There's another one called Saving Luna, which I love. And it's a more feel-good story. It's way different than Blackfish, but I think it's actually harder to pick how you feel about this movie, or the story that this movie tells. It's a very great story, but sad because there's this whale that gets separated from his family in the wild. He's a wild whale, never lived in captivity, and he starts seeking out human attention. This wasn't like something he learned. He just started doing it, and so he kept going after human attention. He didn't have a pod to be with. And then, so all these different groups of people started fighting over this. You even had like Humane Society people being like, don't touch him, don't interact with him, you're messing with nature. And there was even like a possibility of, because he would follow boats. There was a possibility of this boat he would always follow. The guy volunteered his time. He would have taken this whale, Luna, to find his family, to try to find and reunite with his pod. But the Humane Society said, no, that's interfering with nature. But at the same time, they wouldn't let him go up to boats. They would say, don't touch him. Then there was an Indian chief that thought he was a reincarnation of somebody from the tribe. So it's all this fascinating stuff about this whale who lived in this town, this water of this town in Canada. It's fascinating and it's heartbreaking because he was so friendly and lovable and you just wanted to interact with him. But then there's the other side of the spectrum where people are like, don't interfere with nature. You know, you're messing with him. You as a human are messing up the natural order of things. But at the same time, he wanted that human affection. He goes after it. So it's kind of hard to tell you how I feel about the movie. I think people should have been allowed to touch him. And, I think it's a more complex issue. It's not as cut and dry as the issue of SeaWorld. It's not as cut and dry as freeing Keiko is. So to me, that kind of makes it a little multifaceted. And here's a little bit of a description of the movie. Saving Luna is the true story of Luna, a baby male orca who gets separated from his family in a remote Canadian area. When the friendly orca seeks companionship from people, he becomes beloved and feared. The feared part is because, some people don't want him around. Other people think that we're interfering by interacting with him. People can't figure out what to do. To native people, he's a chief spirit. To boaters, he's a goofy friend. To conservationists, he's a cause. To scientists, he's trouble. To officials, he's a danger. To the filmmakers, he's a lovable street kid whale. As conflict and tragedy stain the waters, Luna becomes a symbol of the world's wildest beauty, wonderful to know, hard to save. I do think that's a good description. Some of it's kind of stains the water. That part's a little over the top, but it's a great movie. I can't recommend it enough. A lot of people have heard of Blackfish. Not a lot of people have heard of Saving Luna. It also goes by the name The Whale, which is narrated by Ryan Reynolds. The difference is it's the same essential movie. Saving Luna is like the director's cut. It's not narrated by Ryan Reynolds. And I can't remember which one, but one of them has a more political lean than the other. In terms of, I really can't explain to you how. I haven't seen it in years, but I'm going to rewatch it, I think, this week. I love that movie. I really recommend it. I actually just bought both on DVD, both versions of the movie, because I want to compare and contrast. I've only seen The Whale, the version with Ryan Reynolds narrating it. I have not seen Saving Luna, so I'm going to watch that first and then rewatch The Whale after. Again, they told me, I read, and the filmmakers say that it's essentially the same movie, but some people feel that Saving Luna is a little more personable, a little more down-to-earth type of a story. I guess the way they edited it, I don't know how you could make it so different, but I really liked The Whale, the version I saw, so I'm going to play for you guys the trailer. I think you'll really like it. And then we're almost done with the stream. I know it's a lot of info, but I think if you guys like whales and you like Free Willy, you might like all this stuff. So here we go. Here's a documentary I highly recommend right now. So again, that's a documentary that I highly recommend, also called The Whale, and literally I've got links about both of those things in the description below. You can find the website and lots of information at the links I provided. Okay, and so I do want to touch on some of the comments in the chat right now because I was reading them as I was playing the trailer. So Nails and NY, she asks, does Saving Luna have a happy ending? She needs a happy ending. Oh damn, the trailer played with no audio. Damn it. I don't know how that was possible. That makes me mad. Gosh darn. I set up everything perfectly and that played with no audio. Well, essentially, at least the footage was nice looking. I will show you guys the trailer. It's actually, I think I've got a link to the trailer in the description right now. I'm so sorry that didn't have audio. I tested all these videos too. It's a bummer. But it's a great movie, and of course, you couldn't see the trailer, but you couldn't hear it. You couldn't hear them say, don't touch that whale, don't go near that whale, and then some people were playing with the whale, but the footage you saw was the whale on its own accord going up to humans and interacting in the wild. I think I know what happened with the trailer. I know what happened. I muted the trailer instead of my mic. I meant to do it the reversed. Watch this, guys. I think I'm going to do the right thing now. I think. Oh, no. I don't even have the output here, I don't think. I'm going to play a second of it, and if it doesn't work, I will cut back to me. No, it just doesn't have audio. Oh, wait, no, it does. I see it. Can you guys hear it? My mic's on right now on purpose. I hope you guys can hear it.
That whale needs and wants and craves attention.
I felt that he was desperately lonely.
Here's a whale that doesn't follow the rules.
It was incredibly surreal.
I touched him! No, I touched his grandma.
And I remember being amazed that he wanted to see us as much as we wanted to see him.
When he pops up and he looks at you
in a sort of contemplative way.
And you would be mesmerized or something.
I don't know, he just had a way of getting inside of me, inside of my head, into my heart.
There's a very, very dark side. The dark side is the human side.
If there was a cougar in our backyard, they would have come and shot the cougar.
We were basically put in the situation of saving his life.
Folks, this is not a watchable whale. Where did you? Please don't touch it.
You there, get your hands off that whale and stand up right now.
Catching him, I believe, is really the right thing.
It's okay, he's cut going. I put my life on the line for his protection. It's just no questions asked, I'd do it.
Friendship with that whale would have been the worst thing that you could have done to him.
That was my greatest honor, was being able to be his friend.
Okay, sorry guys, I am so dumb. I muted the video the first time and not my mic. And so this time I just kept both hot because I was like, I'm not risking it. And I guess I didn't need to play it again, but I wanted you guys to hear the description of the trailer, like what they're saying in the trailer, instead of just me trying to describe the movie, because there's all these different parties, and I think the trailer really shows that really well, the different people fighting about what to do about this whale who loves humans and who just is dying for interaction. So again, some of the comments I want to address: is it a happy ending? I cried during the ending. I can't remember exactly because it's been years, but I think it's a powerful story. There's some feel-good moments and great footage in it, but I think ultimately the ending is a little sad, and I do wish things could have been different. So it's up to you if you want to watch kind of a sad movie, but still a powerful, emotional documentary. I would say give it a chance, but it is a little sad, I'll admit, Nails. It's quite a bit sad, I gotta say. So yeah, give him company. He wants company. It's sad. Even in this little town, it wasn't like he was a huge tourist attraction. It was just a little close-knit town, and so he got a lot of attention. But there are some things that kind of made it difficult. There's some reasons why scientists were like, don't interact with him. It's because they thought it was a danger to him. There's so many facets to this discussion. You guys got to watch it. I think you'll really like it. So another thing in the chat, and I'm going backwards to talk about Blackfish really quick, and I know this has been like a 2-hour stream. I'm insane. No other stream will be this long, but I love this movie and these documentaries. But, so, somebody asked, is Blackfish a horror movie or a documentary, and do all SeaWorlds treat their whales the same? Or is it just Orlando? Because, Blackfish talks a lot about Orlando, SeaWorld, and specifically things that are happening there with Tilikum. But I think, regardless of how they are kept in SeaWorld, it's the idea of being in captivity. This is what I found online, and I believe this is from National Geographic. Yeah. So, in the wild, orcas live in tight-knit family groups, share a sophisticated, unique culture, like I told you, passed down through generations. Captivity, orcas are kept in artificial social groups. Captive-born orcas are often transferred between facilities, so they're even breaking up the relationships that are made in captivity too, which is insane that they do that. The stress of social disruption is compounded by the fact that orcas in captivity don't have the ability to escape conflict with other orcas or to engage in natural swimming behaviors in pools. So again, it doesn't matter how SeaWorld technically treats them, they are removed from their family. It creates a psychological toll regardless of how they're fed and treated and cared for. Also, just the amount of space they have, it's not adequate. So it's like getting cabin fever for some of the whales. Some of them are fine and don't have any problems, but it's still not their best life. So that's essentially, to answer the question, no, not all SeaWorlds do things the same, I'm sure, but they do have a standard practice across all SeaWorlds, and regardless of how they do things, I think whales are just not meant to be in captivity. That's the point. I think one of the point of Blackfish is that. It's the main point of the movie. Another point is exposing SeaWorld, which I think is a more political kind of flag to bear, but there is evidence behind to kind of boycott having whales in captivity. So I kind of understand that message a tiny bit, at least. Or quite a bit, I should say, actually. So now let's go into my final recommendations, and then we're wrapping up. So I can't not mention the 2 sequels that I do love, Free Willy 2 and 3. As JPQ said, why the sequels? What the hell? You already freed them. But again, I think people love the movie so much. Obviously, it was a cash cow movie premise. And so if they're not going to harm the whale, why not make other movies? And had some of the original cast, which I loved when they keep the cast in multiple sequels. I liked how they keep that the same. It's familiar faces, familiar characters as well. So I gotta recommend these movies because although they're not as good as Free Willy, I actually think they're pretty decent sequels. And I do have the years that they were released. They were both in the 90s. So Free Willy 2 is from 1995 and Free Willy 3 is from 1997. So I think both you should check out if you haven't already seen them. It's fun. It might be fun if you haven't seen Free Willy in a while to watch the 3 movies together. And specifically, I want to shout out one last thing. Something I flippin' wish I owned. So if you bought Free Willy 2 on VHS, the thick VHS, not the slip kind, the kind that you would open up like a book, it would come with a free Free Willy wooden necklace that is shown in the movie. I wanted this necklace so bad. My cousin Lindsay had this necklace. I was jealous. My friend Burke, who doesn't even know Free Willy, Burke, if you're watching, love ya, but you own that necklace, and I'm jelly as hell. I think Burke's brother, his older brother, gave it to him. Burke's a few years younger than me, so he's not really a 90s kid in the sense that he didn't have the same kind of love for Free Willy as me, but he's got that damn necklace. I'm jelly. I'm so jelly. And here is an original packaging of the necklace. It says free mystical whale pendant. It is a ceramic replica of Jesse's pendant that he had in the version that he wore in Free Willy 2. And I think it says it's a $7.95 value. It's hard for me to read on these small screens. I've got the small OBS screen up. But yeah, that's a steal, man. I'm sure you could find it on eBay, I guess, but I haven't really looked. I want that necklace. I really want it bad. And like I said, finally, if you want to watch the complete story of the whale who played Willy, Keiko, look up this documentary, links in the description. Keiko, the Untold Story of the Star of Free Willy. I told you all about it. I don't have the trailer for that one. I don't think it's needed. We go through this in so much depth throughout this whole stream. We don't need to go into it further. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I know this is a lot of info to absorb, but I just think it's a fascinating topic and something that I think more people should be aware about, because I didn't know about all this till I started watching the documentaries. Then it was like going down a rabbit hole. I got more and more invested, more and more interested about this story, and now I know a lot. I could be a flippin' oceanographer now, right? I guess. I've talked about it so much. It's like I made you guys hear me talk about it so much that you guys could almost be oceanographers now. I'm so sorry, guys. I went on and on. Appreciate your time as always. I had so much fun in this stream, and my next stream will be it might be long too, but it'll be about multiple movies, not just one. And I do want to please ask you guys to like and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Share the video if you love whales, if you found this fascinating, if you think other people might learn things that they never knew and enjoy what I talk about. And I might go back and put some timestamps in, because I know this was very long, and if only I didn't have that one little part where I didn't have my mic muted and I had the trailer muted, then this would have been a perfect stream in my opinion. Had some flubs, but hell, it's over 2 hours long. What do you expect? I'm only human. I'm not Willy. They're very intelligent, just in a different way than us. The cool thing is, this is my last little statement about orcas. So think about this as I depart from you guys. I think this is very interesting to contemplate. So we can't understand anything that whales say to each other or dolphins say to each other, but they have learned to figure us out and our language out, some of it at least, and they've learned how to do what we ask of them. So like in captivity, they've learned to perform tricks, they've learned words, and heck, in experiments, well, this sounds bad when I say experiments, in research, scientists have found out you can teach dolphins sentence structure. They can come to understand the structure of a sentence. So if you mix up the sentence, change the meaning, they can understand that different meaning. I don't necessarily understand how it works, but what does it say about them that they're so intelligent in a different way that they can understand some things that we say, but we can't understand anything that they say? Pretty fascinating stuff if you ask me. Thanks you guys for sticking with me. You guys are troopers. Hope it wasn't too painful. Appreciate you so much. Till next time, that's all I got for you. Look out for the 90s stream coming soon.